What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. We are going to continue through our divisional previews in preparation for the 2024 fantasy football season. We are now going to do the AFC North teams. I'm going to go through all the positions like I did in my last video for the AFC East, talk about quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, defense, and kicker a little bit, and basically what I think about each players on these team previewing their ADP draft position, how I think they're going to do this season. I'm going to be doing a lot of content over the next couple weeks to prep for the fantasy football draft season. So please subscribe to my channel if you're interested in more content in fantasy football, as well as some other content in the description below. So we're going to get into it with the AFC North. We're going to talk about the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore Ravens have got a lot of good fantasy players, so we'll talk about these guys in some depth. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly with all these teams, try to aim for about 20-25 minutes to get all these teams done. So Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson is their starting quarterback. This is a great fantasy football player, very well-known quarterback, and everybody knows that he's a great running quarterback, so he gives you that great floor. Lamar Jackson, you'd like to see a little more consistency in his play. Last season, we kind of saw a little bit of, touchdown regression didn't necessarily go his way. A lot of touches went to Gus Edwards at the time, and because of that, he doesn't rank as high as some of those other guys like Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. But I still have Lamar Jackson as my quarterback 3 behind those two guys. Some boards are having some other guys go up there like Patrick Mahomes and CJ Stroud ahead of Lamar Jackson. I think that's a mistake personally because Lamar Jackson, although he does have those up and down performances, that rushing floor is amazing. And now that he's added some weapons onto this team that I'm going to talk about in a little bit, it could help him out a lot in terms of, generating that space that he needs to really put up a good fantasy season this year. Very high on him. Doesn't really have a lot behind him, though, if he does get injured. So that's something to look out for because their next quarterback on their depth chart is Josh Johnson, which I have no idea how that guy is still in the league based on how he played in that NFC Championship game a couple years back. But, is what it is, I guess. They're bringing in Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is obviously another guy that everybody knows, King Henry, has been on the Titans for years. Now he's on the Ravens. So how's he going to look in this new system? I have my question marks with him. Derrick Henry showed some signs of slowing down this past season. He also had some very up and down games, and he's heading into a new system as he's heading into the back half of his career. What is that going to look like? So Derrick Henry in the mock draft that I did the other day went in the 302 position. He's going generally around that mid to late second, early third range. He's a running back that I'm not particularly high on for fantasy football this upcoming season because, you do have Lamar Jackson as your quarterback. Derrick Henry also shows some signs of slowing down. He does have the opportunity with just how many injuries his backfield has had for so long to really take a hold of this backfield and run with it. No pun intended, for the whole season because he is pretty durable and doesn't get injured. But at the same time, a guy who's changing teams this late in his career, there's a lot of question marks. I think there's better value that you can get in that range. I'm just looking at the other running backs on the board. I personally would rather have Josh Jacobs, and I know that he's switched his teams as well, but he's a little younger. He's heading into an offense where I feel like he's more defined as the guy that's going to get the running back role. Don't really necessarily know how that's going to look in Baltimore, which kind of likes to use a committee more so than other teams. James Cook, I honestly think is probably better value. Rashad White, guys like that, I would prefer to take over Derrick Henry if I'm in a position where I'm picking between him and those other backs, or even just getting one of these receivers in here, like a DJ Moore, like a Mike Evans. I would prefer to have those guys as well. Justice Hill, I think, is a good handcuff. If you have a spot on the end of the bench and you do have Derrick Henry, I think this is a good add. Keep an eye on Rasheen Ali, who's a backup running back on the depth chart who could get some opportunity and could do very well. Wide receivers. We got a lot of question marks with these wide receivers. So Zay Flowers, the guy that really was the fantasy darling last season for this team, had some good games from time to time, but really did not step into the role that you would like to see. He's a guy that's still getting drafted relatively high this season because of potential. He's going around that 5th, 6th round range. Um, I have my question marks with him still because he does really play very well when he's given the opportunity, but he's a guy that I think is kind of more a complimentary receiver than a guy that could really be an elite number 1 receiver. And I don't really know if I feel confident taking that in the 5th round. So his ADP is a little higher than I would like um, in that position. So I would prefer to go elsewhere if you're looking at Zay Flowers. But then again, this team does have a void. You'd like to see that step forward. I just don't know if he's ready for it yet. The other guys on this team, Rashad Bateman is not generally going to get drafted. If he is going on draft boards, I would not take him at all. Nelson Aguilar has been around the league for quite a while and has had some good fantasy games from time to time. But this is a very low ceiling type play that I would not recommend using a draft pick on. I'm very interested in Devontae Walker. He's a guy that is also not getting drafted, but 4th round pick with great speed. His 40 time was among the fastest. I'm going to pull it up real quick. But 4th fastest among wide receivers, 4.36. So he did very well in the 40. And this is a team that's going to need some downfield threats for Lamar Jackson. Zay Flowers, he can be that guy, but he's not got the height. Devontae Walker, a little bigger. He's 6'1". So, this could kind of be... And he's played with good quarterbacks like Drake May, Sam Howell at North Carolina. So this is a guy that I think could really be a sleeper this season. He's not getting drafted. If you have an extra spot on your bench as you're heading into week 1, this is a solid guy to consider picking up. I'm definitely keeping my eye on him going into the season. And then the rest of the receiving core, doesn't really stand out to me as people that can really be taken seriously at this time. But we'll see what happens as the season goes along. Really love Mark Andrews. I talked about him in an earlier video a couple weeks back that his position at where he's getting drafted at tight end is incredible. You're getting him around the 4th to 5th round. Did not have a great season because of injuries, so he didn't place as high as he has in years past. This is a great time to take advantage of that and get him at great value, especially there's not a lot of great tight ends on the board. So if you get Mark Andrews in the 4th, 5th round, that's incredible value. Isaiah Likely is his backup, and some people questioned whether or not he was handcuff value, but based on how he performed last season, he's not. So don't play that game. This defense, I think, is again going to be very good. They have some great players, and they find ways to just keep adding more guys that are going to just continue to make this defense better, like Kyle Van Noy, Roquan Smith. Roquan Smith has been on this team for a bit. My bad. But they are a solid defense. They're probably going to get drafted pretty high, though, so I wouldn't necessarily take them high in ADP. But if they do fall to you in that second to last round, I would definitely try to swoop them up. Justin Tucker, I bring him up because we talk about kickers getting drafted too high, and this guy has always been the kicker that everybody wants to take number 1, but his value last year proved the theory that I've been talking about for years on my channel, that you do not want to take Justin Tucker in fantasy football drafts at his going rate in the 4th to 5th last round. Just don't take a kicker at all if you don't have to. Somebody's going to take this guy like really early, and it's just always a mistake every single season. I know he can be the kicker 1, but you're costing yourself so much value in flex that you could have elsewhere that's just not worth reaching him. Okay, so we're gonna talk about Cincinnati. It took a little longer on that than I would have liked, but Cincinnati's quarterback is Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow got a lot of health question marks. He did have a stretch last season where he was incredible, and I believe it was like week 6 to week 10, and then he had a wrist injury. So, he's got question marks of, is he gonna be healthy enough to be a solid elite quarterback everybody knows this is a franchise quarterback, but can he be put up there with those guys like Mahomes and Allen if he can't stay healthy? He's gonna have this is gonna be a big year for him to try to prove that. He's going very late in drafts because of this, and he's going in the 6th round. And if this is the range that you're getting Joe Burrow, I think this is very good value. especially if you have Jamar Chase. I'll be all over trying to get Joe Burrow earlier and trying to stack that. Wouldn't do that with T. Higgins though, just because I don't think T. Higgins' volume is going to be requisite enough to do that. But Joe Burrow is going to be in pretty good value. You'd like to see a little more rushing value out of him though, so I wouldn't take him over guys like Richardson and like Kyler Murray. But I think that Joe Burrow is still going to be very good value for you. Running back position. So they lost Joe Mixon, so now they're bringing in Zach Moss, and Chase Brown is the guy that's up and coming. So I'm just going to compare both of them at the same time. Zach Moss has always been a mediocre running back pretty much throughout his career, but he played very well last year with the Colts. Now he's heading over to Cincinnati. He's going to have more of that early down back role. But I'm higher on Chase Brown. A lot of people are high on Zach Moss because of how he did last year, but I think if you look at the overall sample size throughout his career, you'd be better taking a flyer on Chase Brown, who's a second-year player, showed some explosiveness last season, kind of has that scat back role, almost kind of like an Austin Eckler type when he was in Los Angeles. I am definitely very interested in Chase Brown at the range that he's going, which is generally after Zach Moss. Chase Brown is going in the 10th, 11th round range. And if you can get him there, this could be a guy who could step in and take on a Joe Mixon role, even have a ceiling higher than that. So this is a great sleeper pick to take on the team that needs a guy to step up in that running back room, really ignite that team, and could be some great fantasy value for you to get late in drafts. Wide receivers, Jamar Chase, very high on him. I need to do a full breakdown of what my receivers are going to be in terms of how I stack them, but just ballparking it right now. As I said, CMC is 1, Tyreek Hill is 2. For me, Justin Jefferson is 3, and then you have CeeDee Lamb, and I think after that it's Chase. So I have Chase number 5 on that list. And I think that you can't really go wrong with any of those 5, but I think Chase especially is going to be very good in fantasy as he has shown throughout his career. My only concern is just the lack of other guys other than T. Higgins. There's a lot of question marks on this team, so that could have more people zoning in on Chase. Higgins has also not always been healthy throughout his career, so that's my only real concern with taking him above those other 4. Higgins, I think, is also getting a little undervalued based on a season that he wasn't healthy last year. He was going in the 3rd round last season. Now he's going more in that 5th round range. And I think this is a great year for him. He's heading into a contract year. He's got a lot to prove. Requested a trade, didn't work out for him. But now this is the chance for him to shine and to break out. And I think that T. Higgins is going to be great value for you in that 5th round. He was the guy that I took at that 4-5 turn when I was drafting. Really high on him. You've got some other question marks on this team after that, since they have some guys that they're replacing, like Tyler Boyd, who left in free agency. Trenton Irwin is the guy that I like the most to come in and step up. He's a guy that's been in the system for a little bit, kind of fills a nice slot role that they could put him in, and I think is a solid receiver. Other guys to keep an eye on as well is Charlie Jones, who's a guy that's also been in the system for a little bit and had some moments last year. And Jermaine Burton, who's a 3rd-round pick out of Alabama, a guy that could also step in as well, and there's a good void for receivers to be had there. Burton is generally, if he is getting drafted in deep leagues, it's very late, and this is, again, very good value. If I'm in that situation personally, I would take a flyer on Burton because as a rookie, there's always opportunity for them, and you taking that chance. But Irwin as well, I think, would be a solid guy to look at to fill that 3rd wide receiver void in the Bengals. Tight end. They have Mike Gesicki that they brought in free agency, and I think this is one of the best tight ends that Joe Burrow has had. Joe Burrow actually throws quite often to his tight ends, and last season he used them all quite a bit in a rotation that included Drew Sample, who's still on the team, Irv Smith, stuff like that. So he's had some pretty good rapport with his tight ends, and Gesicki is probably the most athletic of the ones that he's had, arguably him or CJ Uzomah. But I think that Gesicki is a guy who's not getting drafted. Again, could be very good tight end value. I talked about that last week with Miami Dolphins and Jonnu Smith. So the other guy these are two guys I think that could be some great value in the tight ends if you're in the range that you're just going to be streaming. Defense for the Bengals. I'm not very high on them necessarily. They're kind of an average level defense for me in terms of how they're going to stack up. But they're a good matchup streaming defense that I could see being some good value depending on the matchups this season. One to definitely keep an eye on. Evan McPherson, probably one of the kickers that is going to go higher as well. So he's going to be too high for me in the position that I want to take him. I would not reach for him, like I said with Justin Tucker, but he actually is showing a little more. He's got a little more of a future ahead of him than Justin Tucker, who I think is sadly just going to kind of be on the decline as he ages. So that's it for the Bengals. Now we're going to talk about the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland is going to be rolling out Deshaun Watson again this season. Deshaun Watson did not play very well last season. That's been well documented. And then their fantasy numbers really took off with Joe Flacco, who's no longer there. So what is this team going to look like when you go back to Watson? Is he finally going to be healthy, and is he finally going to play like he did in Houston? I think Deshaun Watson is getting drafted at the range that you could take a flyer on him, and I don't think that would be bad value. Honestly, Deshaun Watson is generally going in the range where he's not getting drafted, even depending on the size of the league. But I would keep an eye on him because he does have a history of being very good. And if he, for some reason, finds a way to dial that back in, maybe with all the criticism over the past few years can light a fire under him. If he doesn't prove it this year, there's a good chance that he doesn't have a job next season. So I think he could be some good streaming value for you that you could pick up and could take off. But all that being said is that he hasn't shown that in the past few seasons. So I wouldn't personally draft him, but he's a guy that I would look at their matchups week to week, see how he's doing in the first week of the season and in training camp, and he could be a good bounce back candidate who could turn things around. Wouldn't be surprised at all to see that happen. So they've got some interesting running back questions in the running back room as well. Nick Chubb is coming back from a really rough injury last season. Don't know if he's going to be ready. So because of that, I don't really feel comfortable drafting him. Jerome Ford is a talented running back who stepped in well at times last season. Didn't really break out like we would have hoped. And they're bringing in Deonta Foreman as well, who has, again, just has durability and finds ways to stay relevant in fantasy. Nyheim Hines is also there too, and he's been a relevant player as well in fantasy. Not really as much worried about him. But I think that this running back room is going to be a committee. I don't really see any one guy standing out. So because of that, I'm not very high on any of them. I think that the highest I would be is Ford. But I don't really know what that's going to look like when Nick Chubb is healthy. So they're all getting drafted late. I think Ford is probably the best value right now. But all of these guys are not really running backs that I'm very high on in terms of how I think that they're going to do throughout the duration of the fantasy season. Wide receivers. Amari Cooper is getting drafted very late in fantasy football, and I think that this is incredible value if you can get him. This is kind of like the equivalent of somebody like Mike Evans last year, who was getting drafted late because you had a lot of questions about what it would look like with Deshaun Watson being back. But Amari Cooper, the volume that he gets alone is enough to put him in the category of elite receiver. And you're getting him in the fourth round range this season. That would be incredible if you can get Amari Cooper there based on his production that he showed last season. I will caveat that in that a lot of that was with Joe Flacco. But nonetheless, the volume is still there even with Deshaun. And if Amari Cooper can stay healthy, now they've got a downfield threat with Jerry Jeudy. I think that this could be a great fantasy asset based on where you're getting him in his ADP. Jerry Jeudy, not really interested in him in fantasy necessarily, but talented wide receiver. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he does find a way to turn things around now that he's out of Denver. But I'm not really interested in drafting him. Elijah Moore is going later, though, that I would feel a little more comfortable with him in terms of just kind of a guy to take a flyer on that you could stash on your bench. He did have some good moments late in the season. Other guys of interest, they drafted Jamari Thrash, who is a 5th-round pick out of Louisville. These rookies like that are interesting to take a flyer on in very deep leagues to see what happens. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if he does find a way to work his way into the top 3, because they do need to have some more receiving threats on this team to help balance out the offense and make things a little more explosive. And then at tight end, David Njoku broke out last season and had a very good year. This was a lot under Joe Flacco, though. So even more so than Amari Cooper, David Njoku performed very well with Flacco as his quarterback. So he's going in the range now that I think his ADP is a little bit higher. I'm going to just check real quick to see where he's going. Generally, that's 7th to 9th round range. He's not a guy that I would reach for, but if you are getting him in that late 8th, 9th round and you don't have a tight end yet, I think it would be pretty good value. But I would not be surprised if this is kind of a regression from last season for him. So he's not one of the tight ends that I'm looking at to be my starting tight end throughout the season, but he is a very good option given the rest of the field. Defense, again, this is going to be an elite defense. It's going to be one of the top ones drafted. It's probably be higher than I would be comfortable taking a defense, but last season they were an elite unit to have, and you can't really go wrong with rolling that out there again. Kicker Dustin Hopkins, not much to really say there. Now we move over to the Steelers. And for Pittsburgh, this quarterback room is going to have some question marks. Russell Wilson is not getting drafted. And then you have Justin Fields, who is a very popular fantasy football player that has not really shown to be an effective NFL quarterback yet. So what do you do with that situation? I would not draft Russ. I don't really think that he's generally going on boards at all. He's somebody to keep an eye on, though. Maybe he could be a streaming quarterback based on the week. If let's say Justin Fields becomes the starter by midseason, I think Justin Fields is somebody that you should pick up. Even for fantasy value for trades, let alone, would be a great move. But that being said, do not go crazy over trying to pick up Justin Fields now and get him on your bench in deep leagues until it's proven that Russ is not is just unfixable and is going to get benched. Then Justin Fields is not going to get any playing time, and he'll just be taking up a spot on your team. But this is a situation to monitor as the season goes along, because if Justin Fields can be utilized appropriately by this team and Arthur Smith, could be some excellent value for you throughout the season. Running back room, Najee Harris did well as the season ended, started extremely poor. Jaylen Warren is very explosive, and because of that, both these guys are kind of splitting touches and kind of going in the later rounds of drafts. I'm higher on Jaylen Warren personally. I talked about him in my video that I did a couple weeks ago as well. Much like the situation with the Bengals and Chase Brown and Zach Moss, I would prefer Warren personally because more explosive player. I think those guys tend to be more of a I give you more reward potentially. There is more risk that comes with it though, but I just think with a guy like Najee Harris, you're not really going to get that elite value that you could have the potential with Warren. I'm just going to shout out Cordero Patterson. How does this guy stay in the league as long as he has? But I mean, him and Arthur Smith must be like this, because they just it's just incredible that he still finds a way to get on rosters in this team, especially at that position. Wide receivers. George Pickens is a very good option to consider at wide receivers in those mid rounds, because there's not a lot of other options on this team, and he's going to have a lot of volume potentially come his way if the quarterback play can be competent enough to get him there. It was pretty bad last season, and Pickens was still an okay receiver to have as your wide receiver 2 or 3. I think that Pickens is one of those guys that is drafted a little higher than I would like. So I personally would be a little more interested in taking a flyer on a guy like Roman Wilson, who again is another very fast 40 runner who um, played in the national championship Michigan team. So you got a lot of potential there as a guy that you could bring in and can step up right away. Calvin Austin is another player that is a sleeper guy. Got some more reps on the team last season, and now that he's heading into another season, could get some more opportunity being in that system. But in general, Arthur Smith is more focused on his running backs and a one wide receiver set than necessarily getting all like a big spread offense going. So I don't foresee there to be a lot of great receiving options on this team. They do have Van Jefferson, but he's never really been an interesting fantasy player to me. So yeah, I don't really see a great path for a lot of receivers to really be great options on this team. Pat Fryermuth is a tight end who's getting drafted. Outside of his rookie year, he's been very inconsistent and often injured. So generally, I'm going to be avoiding him. So yeah. Defense, another good defense that may be getting drafted late or not at all. They added some nice players over the offseason. So, I mean, this is a great defense to keep an eye on if they fall to you in that second to last round. I would definitely be all over swooping them up. Any team with TJ Watt is going to be a great fantasy football defense. Chris Boswell, not much to talk about there. And that's it for the AFC North. Next video, we're going to be doing the AFC South, and we're going to be going through all the teams in the NFL in preparation for the 2024 fantasy football season. Hope you all have a great night, and talk to you next time.